everybody. Another day, another legendary German performance car. In my last video, I shot channel fan and all-round good guy Lorenzo's BMW Z3 M Coupe. And today I'm driving his other BMW. It's a 2000 E39 M5. Now, I've been wanting to get my hands on one of these for some considerable time, in fact even before I started YouTube, and I mean, why wouldn't you? In many ways, this is the last M5 built for the drivers. It is the last one with a manual gearbox. It is, by modern standards, fairly small, but it still packs a relatively meaty punch in the form of a 400 horsepower, 5-litre V8, the legendary S62 power plant. Now, this car, as with the Lorenzo Z3, is in extremely good condition. It's presented here in Silverstone Blue, and unlike my own E92 M3, I would actually call this blue. And the E92, and I think that's Silverstone 2, it does just look silver. From a modern perspective, this actually looks like a pretty subtle car. Even things like the unpainted bits of trim on the side make it look almost like a sort of, well, poverty spec BMW. It's really quite an odd thing. Now, those who know will know, but there are relatively few external giveaways that this is something quite special. Those include the 4 exhaust pipes at the back, the obvious M5 badging on the side, and these very sexy but 18-inch wheels, which I think are just stunning. Sitting in this car, it's all rather familiar. I've never been in an E39 of any description before, actually, but this bears an awful resemblance to an E46 3 Series. I mean, for obvious reasons, they're from the same time period and the same company, so there's really no great surprise there at all. The dials are familiar, the air vents are familiar, the gear shifter is familiar, and in fact even the gear box is familiar, because this is the same Getrag unit as used in the E46 M3. Now, this gearbox, it seems, gets a little bit of stick. No pun intended. Not everybody's a fan of it. Now, in my E46, it was absolutely horrible. But I've used a couple of other E46s, and their gear shifter's actually been, well, one of them was alright, and one of them was actually very good indeed. So it seems to be very much a case-by-case basis that you need to judge these cars on. This one, actually pretty good. Certainly better than the 5-speed unit that was in the Z3M. You can actually heel and toe in this thing relatively easily. That big meaty engine responding not super quickly, but quick enough. Now, the red line is a sort of lowly, by M standards, 7,000 RPM. At the time of its release, this was one of the most complex engines in the entire world. It's got 8 individual throttle bodies, and it produces a very healthy 370 pound-foot of torque. And it's pretty flexible. No, it won't throw you back into the seat like a modern turbocharged lump will, but it also responds like a modern turbocharged lump can only dream of. Steering in this car is also provided by a method that is, well, relatively unseen these days. This doesn't use rack and pinion, this uses a recirculating ball system, which was common in all of the V8 cars of the time period that BMW were making, but was phased out pretty much soon after. What's amazing is that although this isn't at all a small car per se, it doesn't really actually feel that big. Now, it's filled with quite a few interesting luxury features. It's got a roller blind at the back, which I really do quite like, and most amazingly of all, it's got a car phone, like an actual proper car phone down here that I probably can't use because I'll get in serious trouble for it. But that's amazing. Allegedly, it will still work, although this is no Bluetooth item. If you want it to work, you'll have to plug a SIM card into it. Fuel economy is predictably not brilliant. It'll do sort of low 20s when you're sort of being gentle, and not 20s when you are having fun. But I think most people buying this car nowadays are not buying this as an all-round daily driver. I mean, you certainly can. It's got the credentials, it's comfy. The leather in here is proper old school. Actually, in many ways, the styling of the seats and everything reminds me of the Ferrari 456 that I drove not too long ago. Most people these days buying one of these, I think, be buying it because of its classic car status. And it's pretty cool on that front. However, this is not just some old 5 Series. This is an M5. And for this car to qualify for its M credentials, it's got to be able to hustle. So let's see if it can. Certainly picks up well enough. I haven't even begun to get near the top end of the rev range yet, but she's very strong low down and in the mids. Now, although this steering is actually quicker than that in the regular 5 Series at the time, it's still not the quickest, but it is actually fairly accurate and direct. Now, this car, unlike the Z3M, does actually have a couple of modifications. It's been lowered just a little bit, although not by its current owner, and we think it's simply on some lowering springs. The car sits beautifully, and I have to say the ride doesn't actually feel compromised at all. It's also got a slightly modified exhaust. The back box has just been played with a little bit, and if you didn't know, I don't think you'd really realise it's still pretty subtle, and the rest of the system is completely OEM. It feels like about 6.5 is kind of a natural change-up point, but wow, she moves. Overtakes nice and easy, very linear, very predictable. No, it's not the stiffest car in the world, but oh, it's great to fire down a road like this. And you can do so at some pace. The chassis is pretty communicative. Yes, you've got to be careful because that weight is transferring about, but it is officially a 1.8 ton car. This is not light. I'll tell you something though. One of the last cars I drove down here was the E60 M5, the V10. And I gotta say, I think I might be enjoying this one just a bit more. Yes, that gearbox is definitely a part of it. Oh, just the right amount of pace for this kind of road. It's not stupidly fast, but you can still have a lot of fun, and you can get past the slower traffic when you need to. Now, the brakes do work. They feel like they've got a little bit of pad transfer on them, perhaps. There's just a little bit of wobble when you start getting about halfway down the travel. As with many performance cars of this age, I drove a Jaguar XJ recently. It's the same sort of thing. You just got to remember that they don't stop like a sports car. They're not sports cars. It's just physics in action. You know, they've not got the biggest, meatiest brakes. BMWs are notorious for having brakes that are maybe not quite as good as the rest of the car. And so if you want to use this as a performance car, that will probably be an area that I would look into upgrading before I tended to anything else. Now, I have seen people that have supercharged these, but I gotta be honest, for this kind of road, this kind of driving, this is adequate. Oh, it's that mid-range shove, which is just brilliant. And the amazing thing is, driving this thing along, I don't feel like I'm driving anything bigger, more intimidating than a 3 Series. And in fact, I've driven a 4 Series down this road a number of times, and that's considerably more intimidating. Now, a few people have sort of pointed out to me when I mentioned about how big the 4 Series is, that actually it's not really much bigger than a lot of other cars that I've previously owned. Well, the thing is, it's not just the size that is the problem. It's visibility out of a car. It's knowing how you can place it, you know, where the rest of the car is. And a 4 Series is very, very bad for that. Now, this isn't sort of brilliant, but you've got these nice thin A-pillars, very in keeping with the period, and it's a narrow car. or it certainly feels it, which means that you can hustle it down this road with a big smile on your face. I mean, I actually thought that this would disappoint a little bit. Got to be totally honest, you know, it's a 20-odd-year-old car now. This is a pre-facelift one. Facelift didn't really change that much. It rarely does when you're talking about M cars. Now, this car actually has a few bits from the facelift anyway, so somebody's put the xenons that you got at the front, so the facelift introduced the sort of angel eye look that a lot of BMWs have for the 5 Series. And it's also gained LED rear, same as the E46 did when they facelifted that. BMW are a bit odd. They love introducing LEDs in a facelift and then putting crappy, rubbishy, normal halogens in for the next new model, which always just seems a little bit backwards to me. Very, very frustrating. Now, as with many classics of this type, they are available at a varying selection of prices. Now, you can buy one of these from anywhere from about sort of $9 grand upwards. They're more money than they used to be for sure, but they haven't risen ridiculously so. Oh, yes! If you want to buy one of these, buy on condition. I would actually urge you, if you can, to buy privately in something like this, because that way you get to know the owner. Are they a BMW fan? Are they a petrol head? Do they know what these cars are known for? Do they know how to look after them? Now, one of the few major revisions in this car's lifespan was the changing of the piston ring design in them when they went to the facelift. Now, they didn't actually do it at the same time, because this car, although it's a pre-facelift, does actually have the later piston rings in it from factory. The significance there apparently is that earlier engines are known to burn a bit more oil. Basically, you don't want to be seeing the oil warning light in one of these cars. If you go and look at one and that's on when you go on the test drive, I would walk away. They have a proper 25% locking mechanical limited slip differential in them. Relatively narrow rear tyres, so if you want to be a bit of a fool with it, I'm sure you could have quite a bit of fun. However, I'm just enjoying the fact that it's actually got a reasonable amount of grip. Yes, it's a dry day and it's a decent road, which they've repaved a few sections of lately, but this thing really hustles. I mean, yeah, it's old, but so is Mike Tyson. I still wouldn't pick a fight with him. I'm actually on the hunt for a Mercedes replacement. There's every chance that by the time you see this video, I may have already got one. I love that Merc dearly, but I want something with a little bit more performance in it. I was really hoping I wouldn't like one of these, because they are sort of almost within budget, although probably not a good one, and that's painful. And I don't really want to buy a cheap one of these, because I know what will happen. A cheap one of these turns into a not cheap one of these very fast indeed. However, I mean, this particular car is fantastic. I don't like the Alcantara steering wheel, which is definitely not original. And there's some odd stuff going on with the paint as well. It really didn't show up on camera, but at the very top of the door by the window seal, it looks almost like somebody's tried sanding it off. So we're really not sure what's been going on there, but that's obviously something to look at with these cars. So with any old car, if you're going to buy one, check that all the electronics and things work. And this one is fitted with a sat-nav, which is actually a later sat-nav than the car's own model year, but is still embarrassingly out of date. So I personally wouldn't be fussed about them being fitted with sat-navs or upgraded sound systems or any of that sort of stuff, because they're all crap. You may as well just fit your own, honestly. Just be done with it. And there are systems available out there which look pretty much OEM. So if you want to sort of go down that route and put some modern technology in it so you can daily drive the car, do that. Personally, I love the fact that the phone has been left in here, as sort of generally useless as it is. It is just a hilariously sort of 90s touch, and I love it for that. And the 90s, I am a firm believer, produced some of the best cars in the world, and really, you drive this. And I know that if I drove a modern M5, it would smash this to pieces in any sort of real test that you care to give it. I just don't care. This thing is magical. Now, in many ways, this is actually a relatively ordinary car compared with the M5 it replaced, the E34 generation. You see, that was the last M5 to be genuinely hand-assembled. These were made on pretty much the same production line as another 5 Series. They weren't assembled in a particularly special way. I'd love to try an E34 5 Series. I loved my E34 530, so if anybody out there has got one and you're happy to have it on the channel, please do drop me a line. As always, the details will be in the description below. But this thing sits on that beautiful place where it's old enough to sort of be considered a classic, really. I mean, I think it is a classic car. Do you think it's a classic car? Tell me in the comments. I'd love to hear your opinions on that. But it's also modern enough that, you know, if somebody said to me, "Shit, we got to go to Scotland, like now, quickly, hop in the car," oh, I'd have absolutely no doubts whatsoever that it would get us there. I'd happily drive this back down to Munich to take a picture in front of the factory. I'd happily do it now, and you know when you get there, you'd still be fairly comfortable, and you'd have a load of fun on the Autobahn on the way down. You'd also visit quite a few petrol stations. Aral 102, that's my poison of choice when I'm doing a Euro trip. Oh, it's a hearse. Oh, I think I just gave a thumbs up to a hearse. Whoops. Whoops. Actually, it wasn't the hearse. It was I think it was the car that goes with the hearse. It was an old Rolls-Royce, you know, limousine thing. Let's gloss over that. Let's not mention that. M5. M5 is good. E39 M5. I like. Better than an E60? Yeah, I think it might be. For these roads, I think it might be. Bugger! I didn't want to like this. Oh, these switches down here, they look really old. Yeah, I can't buy one of these. It's got old switches in it. Thanks for watching, everyone. Please like, comment below, subscribe if you haven't already, and we'll see you for the next one, which with any luck is going to be another item from BMW's catalogue of interesting performance cars. See ya.